I'm flattered to be joined by our partner here, Magnify Plus. I'll introduce our guest in just a second. But what we want to spend some time on today is to highlight 3 reasons why domain name monitoring is more critical than ever. So as I mentioned, we're lucky enough to have JC Vignay. JC is the CEO of Magnify Plus. He's based in Paris, France, so he has a much cooler accent than I do, so forgive me for that. But we'll spend 30 minutes with you all today, and thank you for joining for the audience, to walk through some highlights of some material that we presented for your edification. And as always, most of this material will be available through the MarkMonitor corporate website. There's a bunch of resources there available, including recordings of these webinars that you've joined. So with that, I'd like to say hello to JC. Good morning, JC.
Good morning, Ed, and good morning, everyone. Glad to be here.
No, thanks again for joining. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about the current domain name landscape. We obviously have global representation here for at least 2 of the continents. And so we'll talk quickly about the current landscape. Many of you are obviously aware of the global TLD universe, but we'll share a couple statistics very quickly. Much more interestingly, we'll then pivot over to talking about the origin story from JC, such as why he started and is leading Magnify Plus, and again, the background story from him. It's always neat to hear founders and entrepreneurial stories in that regard. And then what we'll do together as a presenting team here is share three key reasons why we think domain name monitoring always matters, should matter, will continue to matter going forward. And with that, I'll pursue ahead here. So the current domain name landscape, I spent 8 years of my career at VeriSign, so I always like to give a hat tip to their report. They are a source for what's called the domain name industry brief. And some of the graphics that you see here on this slide are lifted from their most recent report. It was published in February 2024, and it usually looks quarterly rearward. So this data is probably through the end of calendar year 2023, and then they amalgamize the data and present some findings. But no surprise.com continued to represent the majority of new registrations globally. Country code top level domains have increased by about 4% year over year. Many of us in the industry a long time, like JC and I have seen some go-go era where the registrations were crazy levels, just nonstop flood levels. Sometimes those things ebb and flow as the economic situation happens, but year over year growth is happening nonetheless. And so the right-hand graph there on the graphic shows about a 2.5% growth year over year in aggregate. As we look at one more view of this, sometimes it's interesting with all the ICANN talk ahead about the next application round. We thought it'd be interesting to focus on some of the new GTLDs. And so new GTLDs as a percentage of the larger denominator there is about 9%, actually 8.8%. And it's likely to grow. We do get a lot of questions, both JC and I, as practitioners in this space about, when is ICANN going to open up that next window? The last one was in 2012, and some odd submissions for those applications. Obviously, not all of them have come to market by design, but again, these new GTLDs represent about 9% of the universe of top-level domains out there. So with that, we just want to calibrate you all on kind of how big this pie is that we're grappling with, and then pivot over to talking about why we think domain name monitoring is relevant to today. So between JC and I, we're going to talk about some features and benefits of why a monitoring service is available and useful. Obviously, everyone reads headlines about impersonation scams and phishing and fraud and brand abuse and generally malicious domains. They may have adult content or something more sinister, but whether they have offensive content or just kind of dormant until they strike with like a delayed payload type of irritation, these things are serious, and the headlines support that. And so today, the reason we're having the webinar is to talk to you a little bit about what the advantage of a domain name monitoring program. So before we get to that, I'd like to spend a little bit of time with JC and talking about his story. And so, JC, thank you again for joining. If you would, for the audience, please talk to us a little bit about what is Magnify Plus.
My pleasure, Ed. I really like the previous slide because it shows how diverse the threat landscape is. And in a way, that's the main reason for Magnify to exist. I've been in the domain industry and in the intellectual property space for 23 years now, as a registry person, as a registrar, as a corporate domain provider. So I got the opportunity to see the need for protection from a variety of angles. And the reality is, of course, Magnify is not the first domain name monitoring solution. It's not the biggest, but we believe that it's the most flexible because it was, as we say internally, created by lawyers for lawyers. We came up with the solution, my partner Bart Lieben and I, because we were not satisfied with what was out there, and we, more importantly, were not satisfied with the efficiency of what IP owners came up with through these other solutions. As you pointed out right before, the threats are diverse, numerous. The bad guys are becoming more and more evolved, more and more clever, I have to say. And so you need a solution that will adapt as quickly as the bad guys do. That's Magnify. We want it to be nimble. We want it to be flexible. We want it to be use case agnostic. That's very important. We don't pretend that we know what the end user needs, but we're here to serve those needs. And so that's Magnify in a nutshell.
No, I love hearing the entrepreneurial story. I myself am a chicken, so I can't pursue those types of things, but I always admire those that do and do it well. So that led kind of to my second question. You may have covered it with some of the origin story, but why did you choose to pursue this path? I think you talked a little bit about, an efficiency play, that you've seen some other tools out there. Certainly these tools have existed as long as domain name registrations have existed. And some of them are very good, some of them are very strong. But you said you pursued this path for a couple key reasons. I think it might be important just to reiterate some of those for the audience.
Oh, sure. Ed, you mentioned that the previous new GTLD program was 12 years ago, and we all believed that it would move much more quickly than that. I think the industry is in the same state overall, which is we never know what tomorrow will bring, and so. Working on Magnify and providing a monitoring solution to clients is, for us, a way to help them adapt to the evolution of the industry. We cannot stand still because, again, the bad guys don't. It's a whack-a-mole. It's everywhere you go, there is a new threat. The goal of Magnify is to help whack quicker and more efficiently, if you will.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss in my role as a moderator if I asked you, would you do this journey again? I mean, it's, starting a business, being an IP practitioner, raising a child, doing all these things simultaneously is no easy task. But I have to ask, are you from this, or would you do it again?
I would do it again in a heartbeat. It's a very exciting space to be in. You and I know how personal brands are for their owners. It's a way to care about what matter most to our customers. It's a way to reassure and, dare I say, protect the public. Those are very noble pursuits, and so being able to play a part in that is truly exciting and quite fulfilling. So yes, I would do it again.
Oh, good. No, it's good to hear. I was hoping that's the answer, but you never know, right? It depends on the day sometimes.
Of
Well,
course.
let's get into it. We're going to share really the reason we invited the audience here is to hear these pieces. So we're going to pivot forward here to reason number one, and I'll take this one, and then JC will sprinkle in some of his practitioner wisdom. So we think domain name monitoring is a vital component of a larger domain name strategy, right? A lot of folks obviously understand how to register domains, renew those domains. Obviously, Mark Monner's been in that business of doing so for corporates for 25 years, and we like to think we do it well. But the advantages here are that responsible parties can examine some things quite cheaply before you start monitoring, right? You can look at availability reports. You can think about how to apply rights protection mechanisms and blocking options. So again, domain name monitoring fits nicely kind of in a sequence of things. First, you look out the proverbial windshield to see what names might be available if you're considering a new brand launch or divestiture of a unit or a renaming of a corporate entity, which we see happen all the time in the news. But then thinking about, okay, all these upstarts need a name too, so they should be thinking about how quickly can I apply some of my IP against some of these things. And so thinking about rights protection mechanisms and blocking functions is a good, second piece of that recipe card. And then maybe surprisingly to some, doing some domain name monitoring as part of a larger strategy piece can actually help you prune some assets that you may not need. And that might sound counterintuitive coming from a registrar, but in that sense, we want you to have the right size of your corporate portfolio. And again, looking out via monitoring helps you decide, hey, do we need to cover all these brands in all these places? Do we have some blocking in place that could help us, not register every TLD under the sun? No one really has the budget or the wherewithal or the time to do all that. So again, looking what's available, looking to see how to apply rights protection mechanisms and blocking options, and then applying some domain name monitoring are kind of 3 easy steps as part of a prudent portfolio. JC, did I miss anything there?
No, you're quite right, Ed. To talk about domain monitoring, which I know best, it's true that all those mechanisms, the TMCH and more recently Global Blocks, are great, but we see monitoring as almost a second line of defense, if you will. When you've enabled those services, domain monitoring is there to see what those services could have missed, what typo the bad guy would have think of that is not covered by those systems. And also, as you said, it's a great tool to know the portfolio better, especially for big companies. Some subsidiaries may use a different registrar than the registrar you want. Some may not be compliant with your naming guidance. This is all the things that a good monitoring solution will find out for you, presenting you a report that you can use actually in a positive way, not only to fight the bad guys, but also to rationalize a bit your own portfolio. So there's a lot to be said there for budget mastering and keeping sure all the teams are in check.
Yeah, I view it like in somewhat of an insurance policy, right? We're not in the underwriting business per se, but it's something that you hope doesn't happen to you. Obviously, as we see on the left-hand side, everyone has kind of a bullseye, right? It could be a new upstart in the AI world. Those people are getting a lot of press and attention because of AI. And so securing some of those .ai names, there's a race kind of in that particular TLD because of the attractiveness of the larger concept of AI and the popularity. But any brand that has a reputation that they're interested in protecting, or obviously current revenue, future revenue, they become that proverbial bullseye. And so domain name monitoring is, again, one piece of a larger set of pieces here that we think is prudent to install. And that way we'll move on to, okay, we found some information, right? Domain name monitoring identifies kind of activity that's out there. It's not a magic bean. It can't preemptively say who's going to register what on what day. No one can. Very few can, I would say, if they think they can. But let's think about what we can do next. And so, JC, I'll pass this one over to you. Maybe you could highlight reason 2 of why domain name monitoring still and will matter.
Indeed. So the good thing about and the reason why Magnify Plus was meant to be so flexible is, and as I said before, use case agnostic, is that there is a variety of potential users. We're fortunate enough to, through MarkMonitor, to work with the biggest companies in the world, but also with smaller law firms. And so we discovered almost by promoting the service that there was indeed, different shapes, sizes, and roles of people who could benefit from a monitoring system. So first and foremost, as we mentioned, domain name portfolio administrators. Making sure that your portfolio is coherent, that the registrar are well known, that the renewal dates are noted, and so on. So again, it's something very, very useful as a managing tool. Marketing is also an unsung hero of the monitoring space, because again, in these days, social media chatter is essential to a brand, and so with a monitoring solution, you can actually find out what's been said about the brand in real time on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and all the others. So it's a positive use of the monitoring tool right there. The same way it can be used as SEO. What's out there, what's being registered? Am I losing traffic by not considering those domains as useful? Should I actually fight to get them back because they're part of the landscape that I want my customers to go to? And more we see that what started as an IP play, like I want to protect my brand, let's find out what cyber squatting is occurring, and let's do a UDRP to get my name back, has morphed into a cybersecurity play, where much more serious issues are at play. These days, a bad domain can be sent by SMS and send you to your. Just now, and just before this webinar, my wife received a text saying your parcel is delayed. Please click here to reschedule. And of course, we're in the know. So we looked at the URL, had an hyphen in it. It looked fishy. So we knew better and we didn't go. But the point is, this is one of those things where it's less about brand infringement, much more about I'm gonna go. I want my parcel tomorrow, so I'm gonna give all my personal data, and then the next day or the next minute, I'm gonna be impersonated, and fraud will happen. So again, same tool, much different use, and sometimes much critical use.
Yeah, you're right. So many people are working off their phones too. The screen is miniature for those older like myself. And, it's just harder to see, right? You don't pay as much attention when you see it on that tiny screen, and everyone wants to act quickly. And it could be a fictitious thing from the CEO down, says, hey, I need this quickly from you. Please send me that file. But again, it always could trigger some malicious activity. So I'm glad you touched on some of the different audience members. Obviously, these are the personas that manage domain name portfolios. It used to be much more concentrated, certainly within the IP legal departments. But as you've seen by the list on the left here, it's a bit of who's who within all departments: marketing, network engineering, information security. Everyone has a vested interest in obviously protecting their own network from outside abuse and threat, but also domains are such a critical piece of that puzzle. Now, it's just a piece of the puzzle. We get that. It's not, it's not grandstanding, but it's important for everybody to see that there might be something useful here. And just one last thing on the UDRP metric, we want to include this here just to show the increase of cases. That is an important tool that a lot of corporates use to protect their IP, and it's a very good tool. It's a proven tool over more than a decade of instances. But I get those filings daily, and I like to read not the winning cases, but I like to read the kind of complaint denied cases. It's always interesting to see who's going after what name. There's a few instances of reverse domain name hijacking that are found, and again, the complaint denied and the reverse cases are much more interesting to me. But for those of you just that might want to read more about it, the WIPO and the National Arbitration Forum give out kind of their daily results through email. So that's the way you can go to their respective organization websites and find some daily data. It's a little nerdy in the domain space, but that's who we are sometimes. So forgive us for that. But let's go on to the third and final reason that we want to highlight for today. Sorry, JC, you had one more piece here. I cut you off. I think you may have.
Just briefly, you see that the UDRP filings are growing year over year, and it's great. It's a tried and tested tool. It was invented in the early aughts. It works really well. Shameless plug here that Magnify Plus allows you to actually file a UDRP straight from the monitoring solution. So again, with the faster whack-a-mole, if you will. But it's also very, very important to know that while indeed cease and desist to the registrant via the registrar, takedowns to hosting provider, to remove a website, and again, UDRP are quite useful, they may not be not enough or not fast enough when phishing occurs. And that's why, we constantly, you at MarkMonitor and us at Magnify Plus need to be nimble and adapt to the extensive threats that we're facing.
No, thank you for that. That's a good reminder. Now, that's from obviously the eyes and ears and mouths of a legal practitioner, but we want to leave you something also as reason three, and we'll probably tackle this together because we've both seen, anecdotally what this means. But it doesn't always have to be, and this is not an anti-IP legal sentiment, but it doesn't always have to be the proverbial handcuffs or a C&D or a takedown or DMCA notice, right? There's a lot of other options that monitoring gives you. And again, for this audience, it's not always immediately clear that these are available to you. So sometimes monitoring begets a decision. Hey, I see a name for sale. Maybe it's within our budget. Maybe it's wildly above our budget. But let's think about potentially maybe doing some anonymous acquisition there. So we don't have to call them as the big Fortune 500 company and reward them maybe for their misbehavior. But there's other options there to consider. So domain name brokerage services are one piece we want to talk about. A second piece may be a domain name waitlist service. It's been called different things over time, but there are these redemption periods after maybe someone who's squatted or ill-advised registered your name with one of your trademark brands. Sometimes they get the point, maybe through a C&D, and then come expiration of that asset, you might want to get in the queue to kind of get one of those if you can. So domain waitlist services are maybe economical ways to go get a domain that was once taken or put a pay-per-click on. JC, maybe you want to handle some of these others about continued monitoring.
Sure, yeah, monitoring for content changes is dear to my heart. It's a way to, again and again, it also depends on the size of the company, of the importance of the portfolio. Not everyone's appetite for risk is the same, but content monitoring is useful because you could say, okay, this name, I don't want this name to fall into the wrong hands and to mislead my clients, my customers, but at the moment, because it's inert, because it's a pay-per-click or even there's no name servers on it, then okay, I'm gonna let it go because obviously I cannot register everything, right? We've talked about budget issues at the beginning. So monitoring ensures that you can let a sleeping dog lie, and when the sleeping dog appears to be waking, because the monitoring tells you that it was inert yesterday, but today, there's a name server that's been active, there's a mail server that's been active. Well, then, it's time to take action, because that means that the owner of the name may use it to send your customers misleading emails, for example, and that's when you want to act. So monitoring is a way to not jump the gun, but actually take action when it's critical to do so.
Yeah, and those in the audience representing the cybersecurity realm, they know this better than anybody. The same thing happens with malware. There's this concept I mentioned earlier of delayed payload. Moving from a pay-per-click to something more sinister does happen, right? A monitoring service may check it on day 1. I think you need to check it on day 30, day 60, day 90. Periodic or programmatic checks are part and parcel to being good stewards of your portfolio. And so checking for these kind of delayed irritations or delayed actions are prudent, as we said. So thank you for the anecdote. One piece that's near and dear to my heart, I do want to mention, again, we talked about not always chasing the proverbial bad guys or squatters, but sometimes it's a business discussion with your franchisee or your agent, right? It can be insurance, it can be real estate, it can be franchisees like lodging companies, right? They might register things in a geographic location that just are outside of the licensor, licensee kind of behavioral contract realm. And so finding these domains, again, is not always leading to a UDRP. It can be, hey, business partner located in city X. Please, we love the fact that you want to, have a website associated with this name that you've, have a license to use. But one of the rules of our licensing program is that you can't use it in this way, or we own that intellectual property. In other words, those domains should be centralized under the licensor and not out at the fringes by the licensee. And so again, you think that doesn't come up very often, but those types of business interactions, those types of business correspondence between trademark owner and business partner come up more and more. And so again, it doesn't always have to be the sinister squatter or the counterfeit squatter. It can be something kind of in between. And using domain name monitoring to keep an eye on those types of things is prudent as well.
That's a very good point, Ed. It brings me to another important aspect of monitoring is, your knee-jerk reaction internally in a company might be, well, I have people, I have my list of franchisees, and we can check regularly, and that's fine. But what happens is a monitoring solution, any monitoring solution really, complements your human element. Quite possibly, your internal staff has more important and more critical things to do to just go over the 10, 50, 100 websites that compose your franchise people every week or every month. What monitoring does is it brings the right data to you, freeing your time for the other tasks, but also making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. That it's not about what you didn't see or what you didn't look for. The data is brought up to you so that you can actually take action on it. And as you said, the action might be very friendly. Mr. Franchisee, can you please respect the guidelines and put the logo on the left instead of on the right, to the critical path, which is, I'm the CISO and I want this content, take it down immediately. So the granularity and the flexibility, I think, are very important for our listeners to keep in mind.
No, I like the way you capture that. So that was the intent of today. We were very fortunate enough to have our partner and the CEO of Magnify Plus, JC, on. So thank you, JC. I'll just finish with this one piece here. We have a series of Domain Dynamics events coming up in London in the UK and New York in September. So we'd love for you, those in the audience today, to download the handout through the webinar tool. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, the Mark Monner corporate site has a lot of interesting collateral for different things, obviously, that we offer, including the domain name monitoring piece that we discussed today. So we wanted to give you kind of quickly and succinctly 3 good reasons why this is a compelling service. We hope that you gain from this today. And again, this is one installment of many within the Mark Monner webinar series. So with that, thank you to JC and thank you to the audience for joining. We're very lucky to have your time today. And we want to be respectful of that time and let you go back to your next inbox item. So thank you again for joining today and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.